Imagine a courtroom. In the center sits a boy. He is so small that his feet don't even touch the floor. He's 14 years old, weighing barely 95 pounds. He looks like he should be playing baseball or helping his mother with the laundry. Instead, he is surrounded by an ocean of angry faces, none of which look like his. There is no DNA evidence. There are no witnesses to the crime. There is only a rumored confession that no one actually wrote down. In exactly 81 days, this child will be led into a room containing a massive oak electric chair. Because he is too small for the equipment, the executioners will have to find something for him to sit on. They will choose a Bible. This is the story of George Stinney Jr. It is a story of a town called Alcolu, a double murder, and a trial that lasted less time than a lunch break. But more importantly, it is a story of a 70-year-old secret that would eventually bring a state to its knees. 1944, South Carolina. The town of Alcolu was a company town, divided literally and figuratively by railroad tracks. On one side lived the white families who ran the local lumber mill. On the other, the black families who worked it. The atmosphere was thick with the tension of the Jim Crow South. For a black teenager like George Stinney Jr., survival depended on knowing where you could walk, who you could look at, and when to keep your head down. On March 23rd, two young white girls, 11-year-old Betty June Binnicker and 7-year-old Mary Emma Thames, pedaled their bicycles toward the black side of town. They were looking for maypops, a type of passion flower. They saw George and his younger sister, Am, near their family's porch. The girls stopped and asked a simple question. "Do you know where we can find some flowers?" George pointed them toward a nearby field. The girls thanked him and rode off. It was a mundane, forgettable interaction. But for George Stinney Jr., those few words were a death sentence. When the girls didn't return for dinner, the town of Alcolu erupted. Hundreds of residents joined a search party that lasted through the night. It wasn't until the following morning that a searcher spotted a bicycle submerged in a water-filled ditch. Nearby, in the mud, lay the two girls. They had been beaten with a heavy metal spike. The grief of the town immediately curdled into a thirst for vengeance. The police didn't look for forensic evidence. They didn't look for a motive. They looked for the last person seen with the girls. By the afternoon, police arrived at the Stinney household. They didn't just arrest George. They took his older brother John, too. While John was eventually released, George was kept in a locked room. The injustice begins. Under the laws of South Carolina at the time, 14 was the age of responsibility. George was treated as an adult. He was questioned for hours without his parents. He was questioned without a lawyer. The police emerged from that room with a claim. He confessed. But here is the detail that should haunt every viewer. There is no record of that confession. No signed paper. No court reporter. Only the word of white officers in a segregated town. Fearing for their lives, George's family was forced to flee Alcolu immediately, leaving their 14-year-old son alone in a jail cell, surrounded by people who wanted him dead. The trial of George Stinney Jr. began and ended on April 24th, 1944. Let's look at the defense. George was represented by Charles Plowden, a man with no criminal defense experience who was currently running for political office. To defend George was a political suicide mission. Plowden called 0 witnesses. He conducted no cross-examinations. He presented no evidence to counter the prosecution. The trial lasted roughly 2.5 hours. The courtroom was packed with over 1,000 white residents. No black citizens were allowed inside. When it was time for the jury to deliberate, they left the room. They weren't gone long enough to even discuss the facts of the case. In just 10 minutes, they returned with a verdict: guilty. No recommendation for mercy. The judge immediately sentenced the 14-year-old to death by electrocution. Plowden, his own lawyer, didn't even file an appeal. He later said, "I didn't think it would do any good." June 16, 1944. George Stinney Jr. had spent 81 days in a jail cell where the only person who visited him was the jail chaplain. When he was led into the execution chamber at the South Carolina State Penitentiary, he was carrying a Bible. It was a gift, his only possession. The guard struggled with the straps. The old Sparky electric chair was designed for grown men, not children. His small frame rattled inside the leather bounds. To make sure his head reached the electrode, they placed a Bible on the seat and sat him on top of it. When the switch was thrown, the first jolt of 2,400 volts hit his body. The oversized mask slipped from his face. Witnesses reported that his eyes were open, filled with tears, staring at the people who were killing him. He was pronounced dead 4 minutes later. For 70 years, George Stinney Jr. was a footnote in a dark history book. His siblings, however, never stopped fighting. They lived their lives in the shadow of this tragedy, always knowing their brother was home with them when the murders supposedly happened. In 2014, the case was finally reopened. New evidence was presented, evidence that should have been there in 1944. A cellmate of George's came forward, claiming George always maintained his innocence. Forensic experts testified that the metal spike used in the murders was too heavy for a 95-pound boy to swing with that much force. Judge Carmen Mullen, after reviewing the trial, made a landmark ruling. She vacated the conviction. She cited that George's confession was coerced and that his legal defense was non-existent. She didn't just say he didn't get a fair trial. She implied the entire system had committed a crime against a child. George Stinney Jr. was finally legally innocent, but it was 70 years too late. George Stinney Jr.'s story is more than a true crime tale. It's a mirror held up to the dangers of a rushed justice system and the poison of prejudice. We can't change what happened in 1944, but by remembering his name, we ensure that the 10-minute trial remains a stain on history that we never, ever repeat. What do you think is the biggest lesson we can learn from George's story? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story important, please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the shadows of history. Rest in peace, George.